I didn't learn this till I was 54 years old. If I had known this way back when, I would literally not have been a walking red flag for most of my life. I would not have taken my stress out on my family. I would have been more peaceful and more powerful because I had no idea how much power I'd given to other people.
Mel, your new book, The Let Them Theory, it encourages people to just let control go over other people's choices. And the part that I love is that you said it helped to heal and fortify your relationship with your daughter. Can you share both the theory and how it brought you closer together?
Absolutely. So the Let Them Theory is a simple mindset tool that helps you identify literally in a moment what's in your control and what's not in your control. And the way that you use it is very simple. If you're in a situation and some other person is stressing you out or upsetting you or offending you, or you're worried about them or they're treating you poorly, you literally say, let them. Because the number one thing in life that you will never, ever, ever, ever be able to control is another human being. You can't control what they think. You can't control what they do. You cannot control how they feel, period. And any psychologist will tell you that any time that you spend trying to only makes you feel more stressed out, frustrated, and out of control. And the problem for all of us, and I didn't learn this till I was 54 years old. If I had known this way back when, I would literally not have been a walking red flag for most of my life. I would not have taken my stress out on my family. I would have been more peaceful and more powerful because I had no idea how much power I'd given to other people. And nobody does, because we don't understand how we're turning other people into the problem. And I've got very important and exciting information. And it's this: if you feel tired in life, if you are frustrated, if you're stuck, if you're stressed out, if you feel like you never have time for yourself, if you're just not as happy as you'd like to be, the problem isn't you. The problem is you're unknowingly giving power to other people. And you do it in 4 ways. You allow them to stress you out. You worry about and you manage what they're thinking. You navigate your life based on their moods and their opinions and their disappointment and their guilt and their expectations. And you paralyze yourself because you're chronically comparing yourself to them and telling yourself that if they're successful or they're this, then I can't have it. And it's simply not true. And what the Let Them Theory does is that any situation that you're in, and you're going to use it with your family more than anybody, because I think family teaches you how to love people you hate sometimes, right? You got to let them, because you're not going to change them. And what you will learn as you start to use this is people only change when they feel like changing. People only change when they're ready to change. People only change when they're ready to do the hard work to change. And the other piece that you have to embrace is that we think worrying about or pressuring or judging or pushing people to change motivates people to change. It's actually the opposite. If you look at the wiring of a human being, everybody has a fundamental need for control. When you're in control of what you're thinking about and your decisions and your future and the environment that you're in, you actually feel safe. And the problem is, if Martin's doing something that is worrying me, now his behavior is something I want to control. But Martin has the same need to control his life as I do. So when I start to push on Martin or suggest that Martin should do this or should do that, what does Martin do? Martin pushes back because he needs to be in control. And I didn't realize that I was creating so much unnecessary friction and frustration and distance with people in my life. I didn't realize how much time and energy I was losing because, let's just take a simple example. You're at the grocery store and there's 5 people in front of you and there's one cashier. Beep.
We've all been there.
Right?
Yes.
And immediately the stress rises up inside you. And then all of a sudden you get agitated. And then you start thinking, why are they not calling it? And then you're looking around, and then you start thinking you can run the store better than anybody, right? And now let's just stop and actually really look at what this is. This is you giving power to something that you do not control. And when you do that, a number of things happen. Number one, did you notice as the stress goes up, your life force energy goes out? So you are allowing stupid, meaningless, all kinds of irritating people that are beneath you and not worth your time and energy. You are allowing it to exhaust you. And you don't have to. And the solution is just to say, let them. And immediately you feel peace. Because what you're doing is you're tapping into a tremendous, I feel like I've got everybody's ancestors with me, because this is an application of Stoicism, of Buddhism, of radical acceptance, of detachment theory, of literally not reacting and staying in your peace. And then something interesting happens. You say the second part, which is let me. Let me remind myself that in any situation, I have power, because there are three things I can control. I can control what I think about next. I can control what I do or I don't do, because you can leave the supermarket. You could, if you never have time to talk to your friends, you could pick up the phone and call your friend or your grandma. You could practice meditation. You could say a prayer. If you say, let me, and remind yourself that you have power, right?
Love
and
that.
so that's what it is.
It also, you said, all of these different ancestors, you're bringing in the ancestor of Martin Luther King Jr. and the whole civil rights movement.
Yes.
Because I think what people also forget is that when you're talking about the lunch counters, when
Yes.
you're talking about the freedom riders,
Yes.
they trained.
Yes.
They didn't just go and, and so, and a
To be
lot of that
non-reactive,
was,
yes.
and it was a lot of what exactly that you're talking about, and let them. Like, this is like, they're going to do this.
Yes.
I choose how then I will respond to that. And what I also think is important is, like, it is training.
Yes, it is training.
It is, you have to think about it, and you have to.
Yes, it is discipline. And here's the other thing it is. Because a lot of people hear this and then they'll say, wait, you're just allowing people to walk all over you? You're allowing people to abuse you? And I'm like, oh no, it's the opposite, because you're actually allowing it now. When you say let them, it's almost like you're allowing it without allowing it, because you're saying, I see the reality here and I see that I can't control this. And so I choose my response because I know I do have power. And oftentimes the best response is no response. The best response is peace. And we give too much energy and too much fear into things we can't control. And in doing so, we blind ourselves to the fact that you always have control. And, I whether you're talking about a family dynamic, or you're talking about a community, or you're talking about a world at large, I find it just so sad and fascinating that we always let the most challenging and toxic behavior seem to get all the power. But I actually think the opposite is true. I believe that the person that is peaceful, I believe that the person that understands their power, I believe the person who actually constantly reminds themselves, wait a minute, I have power here, because I have power over my thoughts, I have power over my actions, I have power over how I allow my emotions to rise and fall. And it's inside that power that any single person can change something for the better. And, that's what...
Because you're responding and not reacting.
Yes.
And responding is when you come from a place of power.
Yes. And it's also how you take personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Let's talk about responsibility. Because the word responsibility is just the ability to respond. And everybody has that. And so when you really remind yourself of that, now you can be the person that changes everything, because it just takes one person to change the energy and dynamic in a family. It takes one person who cares enough to change the politics in a country. It takes one person to just shift everything. And if you don't like where you're at, or you don't like where your family's at, or you don't like something in a relationship, or you don't like something in the world at large, that one person is you. And as long as you give your time and energy, and you give other people power, their opinions, all of it, none of which you can control, you are not present to the power you actually have and the time and the energy that you need. to create the change that you're capable of changing.
Two thoughts come to mind as you're speaking. One of them is it's like the serenity prayer, which my grandmother would always say. Our grandmother would always talk about, change the things you can, forget the things you can't, the wisdom to know the difference. But the second thought that came through my mind was as you talked about the lack of reaction, it is like the nonviolence movement. Nonviolence is not non-action. And the let them is a power to not let the negative drive your choices. But instead, even under the toughest circumstances, you have the ability still to respond. And Martin, I think of like the most extraordinary thing. I think one of the most extraordinary acts of courage wasn't only your dad, but it was also your grandfather.
Yeah. So I think everyone knows that my father was assassinated. I was 10 years old. My father's mother was also assassinated in the church while praying the Lord's Prayer. And again, my grandfather, as a minister, had been preaching forgiveness. It's one thing to preach that, but then to have to practice it and exemplify it because you've gone through this situation. You're telling all your parishioners, yes, because you can say that. But now you can say from a personal standpoint, I have been impacted, but this is the way I choose. I choose to forgive. I choose to continue to show up in love. And he did that in many ways throughout his sermons, basically saying, I refuse to allow the man that killed my lovely wife nor my son to reduce me to hatred. I love everybody. I'm every man's brother. That was a choice. That impacted us directly, meaning my siblings and I, obviously my mom and siblings and I. Even though we had learned it as children, now we had to live through it. And again, a choice, because we could have chosen to be angry and hostile and hateful. This is what I can control. This is how I'm going to choose to live my life. And hopefully it sets an example for others.
Well, and didn't let hatred come into his heart.
No, he did not allow that.
One thing I do want to say, that and this reminds me so much, because when I speak, and I use the story a lot as it relates to our nation and world, but I think it also relates to everything like personal. And I talk about the story of the two wolves. Heard that story? And I talk about the fact that the little girl goes up to her grandmother and says that, grandmother, that there is a war going on inside of me, and there are these two wolves and they're at battle, and I'm not sure which one is going to win, because one is full of anger and bitterness and hatred and hostility, and yet there's another wolf that's full of love and nobleness and peacefulness, and they're really at a battle, and grandmother, tell me what to do. Who's going to win? And her grandmother looked at her and said, the wolf that you feed. And I think this reminds me, let them, like, we get to choose.
Yes.
What wolf are we going to feed?
Yes.
We get to choose that in the world, and that's the wolf that will win. And we get to also choose that as individuals. And we have to decide every day what wolf that we're going to be feeding. Now, Sawyer, when you were writing this book together, you were actually working on a relationship chapter while you were going through a breakup.
Correct.
Do you mind? Can you talk just a little bit about that and maybe give someone advice that is going through a very hard breakup? It's particularly when you're, at any age.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, of course. So, ironically, actually, I was writing the breakup chapter, or starting to write it, and that morning and then that night I got broken up with. And so then the next morning I'm like, this is horrible. I can't let them move on. Rip, delete, delete, delete. But then I really thought about it, and over the course of a few months, like, I was so upset. And I think when someone goes through a breakup, there is no good advice. There's no toolkit. There's no YouTube video. There is nothing anyone can say to make you feel better. And what people often tell you is the generic, oh, you just have to learn to love yourself again, which at that point, you hate yourself. You feel ugly. You feel undesired. You feel unloved and rejected. And so I really wanted, as we continued to write this chapter together, to make sure that the person reading it actually could put, as Mel always does, but put action towards it. It's not just some blank advice where you don't actually know what to do. And so we both have the same therapist, Ann Davin, smartest woman in the world. And what Ann told me to do is, well, first she explained that when you go through a breakup, that it's actually you and your partner or your past partner, your bodies and your neurological makeup is intertwined.
Yep.
And so actually what's happening is you're breaking patterns in your body, and that impulse to text them 15 times a day, or feeling like they are sleeping next to you, or you can hear them in the car, or you want to call them and tell them about something, all of those little impulses in your body are because the pattern is so locked in and intertwined that the process of a breakup is actually about breaking those patterns in
The
your body.
energies.
Yes.
The
And
energy
it's
field.
so hard. And so it's actually grief, because when you go through a breakup, it is the death of a future or a person that is no longer here. And so I think as we were writing the breakup chapter, I wanted to make sure that we had really actionable advice. And so what I will tell to all of you who are listening, if you are going through a breakup, is first of all, you're not alone. And second of all, is I encourage you to do what me and Mel call a 30-day rule. And the 30-day rule, or reset, or all of that, is basically to cut contact for 30 days. And that doesn't just mean don't reach out to them, don't text them. It means you cannot look at any photos, any voice memos.
What about social media?
No
now?
social
So like you can't
medias.
get on their Snapchat
Nope.
and
Mute everything.
Mhm.
Because what happens, and this is what Anne described to me, is that every single time you reach out to them or you hear their voice, which is especially really bad, or you're looking through past photos, every single time you do that, it reinstates the neurological pathways in your body that convinces you that they are still around and they're still in your life. And they're not. That life is no longer. And so you are basically trying, every time you connect with one of those items or photos, it prolongs the heartbreak, it prolongs the grief. And so we encourage everyone to do a 30-day reset and do not reach out to them. And
That's where the let them comes in, because you're going to have to say, how many times a day would you say let them?
like 20 times a day.
And then do you literally block? Because I know, like, okay, Mel, back in our days, we could just, block the phone number or not look at photos. So does that mean, like, now
Yes.
for your age, our daughters, does that mean no social media? Like, so do you
Everything.
physically block
Yeah.
their
Full
social media?
Full detox.
It literally is a
Full
detox. Like,
detox.
just like, you can't get sober until you quit drinking.
Wow.
And while you go through that process, your body's going to go through withdrawal because you're learning how to live life without it. And that's why you have to say, let them leave, let them move on, let them hook up with somebody else. And let me remind myself that they're gone. Let me remind myself that every time I look at their location or I listen to a voice memo, that I am keeping myself trapped in a life that no longer exists. And so it is a form of grief. And the hardest thing about being a parent is that when you see somebody that you love struggling, you would put yourself in front of a moving car
Yes.
in order to take it away. But when you do that, you basically communicate to somebody that I don't believe you're strong enough to handle this. And so I had to let her grieve. I had to let her wear pajamas and sit in her bed for 3 days. I had to let her ask me to remove him from the digital camera rotation situation. And as I'm like going, pause, because I'm even pausing it because I'm like, maybe they'll get back together, maybe they'll get back, and so let them, and let me remind myself that I cannot heal for her.
Yeah.
Let me remind myself that she is capable of moving through this. Let me remind myself it's not my job to take her pain away. It's my job to comfort her in her pain.
And what I will also say, why I think the let them theory is so powerful, is obviously when you use it, it's with my ex, I was just saying, let them constantly to myself, but you can also use it in communication, because at first you were not so amazing as you described. She was always trying to talk about it, always trying to say, are you okay? Are you okay? And I would say, I am trying to let you have your own process through this, because I know you are also losing someone in your life and something you envision was going to happen. And at the same time, I need you to let me cry and be depressed and eat bonbons every single night and just leave me alone a little bit. And I need you to let me take a break and to not talk about it and to come to you when I need you. And I promise I will. And so I feel like you can also use it in communication, which acknowledges what you want, but it also acknowledges what I need and what I want.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it really brought us, like, and this is what I mean, like the process of it, of writing this book and researching this book, it really, and using the let them theory and exploring it around love and stress and struggles and trying to change other people, because that's what we do, right? Wanting someone to do better, wanting someone to be more motivated, wanting someone to forgive. That's a beautiful thing, to see possibility for someone else. That's not the problem. The problem is how we go about it. And we don't realize we're working against the wiring of human beings. And when you should push yourself, but when it comes to the people in your life, you actually have to let them live their lives, because it creates space for true connection and change to be. I mean, after all, love is truly loving somebody for who they are and for who they're not. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us live up here, and we really are living in the possibility and in the fantasy, but we are not truly accepting and connecting with the reality of the person that we wake up next to or we sit across the table with. And all we want is to feel like the people that are in our lives actually see us for who we are. And, do you want to know? And oftentimes it's true, especially when we think we know best. And we underestimate how hard people are already working. The hardest working person, for example, in a classroom is not the kid getting A's. It's the kid who's failing. The person who is actually working the hardest on their weight is the person who's unhealthy. People know when they're not thriving. People know when they're not reaching their potential. People know when they're quietly quitting on themselves. And so when you and I, with the best of our intentions, keep going, why do you keep dating these losers? Or can't you be more motivated? Or, why wouldn't you take better care of yourself? That just adds more pressure on top of somebody who already feels like they're not measuring up, and they're in deep conflict with themselves. And when you learn to let someone cry it out, you learn to let someone learn from the greatest teacher in the world, which is life. When you do not shield people from the consequences of their decisions, but instead you stand by their side and you believe in the power that they have to meet the challenges of their life, then you create the space for a human being to reach their own potential on their own timeline. And what happened for us is, I think so many relationships, particularly in family, I don't know how you guys feel about your relationship with your daughter, but there's that intense love, and then there's that like, right? And we were like a death by 1,000 cuts with one another. We're constantly missing the mark a little bit, and then one of us would be offended or annoyed, and then she'd go off, and then I'd go after her, and we'd try to talk, and then I'd try to buy her something, like whatever, let's just make this go away. And you would then manipulate and be like, let's go to the mall, because now we're going to be like, oh my God, and then I'd be mad because I'd be like, I just bought you all this stuff and now you're not nice to me. But what were you going to say?
Oh no, I was just going to say, I think within a very short summary, our relationship, and this is what I haven't described yet, but 2 years ago, we were doing some therapy, and I had this vision of me as like an infant, like 1 or 2 months old. And it was as if I was looking up, I was in a crib, and I was looking up into at the ceiling, and I remember wanting my mom to come. And she, like, my dad kept coming to pick me up, or this woman who, her name was Joni Twining, who helped during the postpartum depression with her and her giving birth to me, kept picking me up, and all I wanted was my mom. And all I wanted was my mom. And she never came. And I honestly think that is a real memory. And when I started going through childhood, I think her working all the time reaffirmed that in my mind, is that I always wanted her to come and like pick me up and be with me and give me attention and make me feel like I mattered. And she was off doing amazing things, but always away. So it confirmed to me that, at least in my mind, that I didn't matter. And so I think then that is what like created the tension between us. Is I then developed the mindset, well, I don't need you and I don't want you and I can do this on my own, and I'm going to go to Cambodia and I'm going to go to Asia and I don't need any of your money or any of your help, and I'm never working for you. And
Now's the truth.
and I think that
Fascinating.
at the same time, like all I wanted was to be near her and to be her and looking up to her. And it wasn't until we finally started working together this entire past year that I think it not only brought us closer in proximity, which helps, but I think the let them theory and using the let them theory with each other is actually what healed that entire separation, because I was finally able to let her be who she is without wanting to change her and without wanting to without getting mad at her all the time because of little things that I thought were annoying or I thought were disrespectful, or I wanted her attention on me versus someone else. And so I think that it wasn't until I was able to say let them and acknowledge this is who she is. She's freaking crazy and pisses me off and is the creative, and I'm like the OCD organization. So writing a book was very traumatic sometimes. But it wasn't until I was able to let her be who she is and accept it and have more compassion and more of a lens into everything that she goes through every day and how much work she actually does. Oh my gosh, like when I joined the company, I couldn't even believe how many areas and how many people rely on her and how big the company is. And my siblings don't know that. They would have never known that. They still probably will never know that because they don't see her in her everyday element. But again, I couldn't just let them, because then I felt whenever you just let them, you can find yourself very lonely or without many friends because you feel superior. You're like, I'm better than them, let them. I'm the bigger person, let them. I don't have to do anything. I'm going to sit in my silence. I'm going to cut off this relationship. Let them, let them, let them. I know I can't control you, but I'm not going to do anything about it. But it wasn't until I started saying, let me, like I am in control of me and my mom's relationship. She's not in control of our relationship. I am. And so I need to show up differently. I need to be more open. I need to have more open arms. I need to let me accept that she's going to rewrite the manuscript 11 times. And I'm going to let them, and I'm going to let
Sawyer.
me.
Well,
Embrace it.
and the corresponding thing happened to me because, again, it's about peace internally and what you can control. And it's about learning to allow people to be who they are and see them perhaps for the very first time. And I think it's very easy as a child, I know I did this with my parents, to forget this is their first time being a human being. This
First
is their
time being a
first time being a
parent.
parent.
Oh my God, yes.
That you can only give people what's been given to you. You can only meet someone as deeply as you've met yourself. And I think it was Oprah that tells a story about how, if you're a person that needs a gallon of love and somebody has only a quarter cup to give, if they give you the quarter cup, they've given you everything. It just didn't feel adequate for what you needed, which is that mismatch I'm talking about. And so it creates so much more compassion because it forces you to really see people for who they are and who they aren't, not through the lens of judgment, but through acceptance. And then when you say the let me part, it is true. I am responsible for our relationship, just like she said she's responsible, because I'm responsible for the energy that I bring. Just like your grandfather said, I'm responsible for the peace inside me. Why on earth would I give it to this person? And so I'm going to take the power back because that's where the power lies. And so what I started to notice, because just like my creativity and ADHD drives her absolutely bananas, her intensity and the Excel spreadsheets and the this, and this is like, I can't think like that. And then she would get all and then I'd be like, let her go upstairs to her room and remove herself because she needs to. And let me not go try to solve this. And what I also noticed is that when I wasn't so frustrated or there wasn't a lot of tension between us, I actually saw what I wanted, which was I wanted to hug her. I wanted to go check on her, not through a place of changing, but through loving.
One of the things that I keep feeling as I'm looking at both of you, but particularly you, Sawyer, is that the red shoes, and at the end of The Wizard of Oz, and when she was told that it was within you all along.
Exactly. The power is
It's
always
all
in you.
the power is always, yeah. And so that I feel like the journey even that you've been on up into this point, one of the things I just want to say to you, that the power has been within you all along.
Thank you.
Okay, so menopause is having a well-deserved moment, right? And Gen X and younger women are really starting to have the conversation about everything that goes with it, and to know that we need answers. So as you are someone that's asking all of the experts and all of those aging questions that so many women have been too embarrassed to ask for too long.
Yeah.
We think that everything stops at childbearing and that's it. And then, so how have you seen this empower your listeners? And then what have you heard from them?
This is an excellent question. So just to give you a sense of just how important of a topic this is, Apple just named an episode that we did on menopause with one of the leading female doctors on it as the number 2 most downloaded and shared episode of any podcast anywhere in the world of the year this year. And the reason why this is important is because there is every single day, I think the research is 8,000 women enter menopause. And what I didn't know, because this was like a gigantic, what? How could I get through life and not know simple facts like this? Like, I had no idea that women were not actually included in clinical research until the 1980s because of our hormones are fluctuating. So it can throw off clinical trials. And even to this day, they mostly use women that are postmenopausal so that our hormones are not impacted. And so the drugs that we're taking are almost like golf tees. The guys get the ones that are, a little bigger, and then we move the dosage up, but we're not actually looking at the impact on hormones. So that's a problem. Second thing that blew my mind is that if you think about a woman's body, every single organ of a woman's body has receptors for estrogen. Estrogen is like the oil in a car. It runs everything. And women used to have a lifespan that was less than 50 years old, which is why if you look at the hormone kind of ranges of women, we peak in terms of the natural estrogen that's created in our bodies right around the childbearing years. And if you look at like life expectancy rates way back in the day, well, most women died before they were 50 anyway. So if all the estrogen is gone, who cares? Because she doesn't need it because she's dead. But by the time a woman turns, and I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but it's something like 40 years old, you have 1% of the estrogen in your body left. If your brain requires estrogen, if your muscles require estrogen, if your heart, if every part of your body has a receptor for estrogen, you want to know why it does? Because it needs it to run. And so women for years have been wondering, why on earth after I have kids am I itchy and dry and grumpy and I can't remember things and my body temperature is like I literally, if I'm in a cold climate and I have a hot flash, you can actually see smoke coming off my skin. Like it's, and I'm like, I'm not mad at you, Chris. I'm just like hot, honey. And so hearing this information, it suddenly makes sense. I'm not crazy. The body that I'm in actually has outlived the evolution of the way it's designed. And so one of the reasons why hormone replacement therapy, if it is safe for you, and for the majority of women it is so revolutionary, is because you're actually just putting oil back in the body so it can run correctly. And it starts to make sense if you think about it that way. And for too long, women have been told that they're crazy, or that they're this, or that they're making their symptoms up, or this, or that, or the other thing. And we're not crazy. And thankfully, women are now talking about this. Doctors are going through training because, Dr. Mary Claire Haver, who is the person that came on, who is the medical expert, basically said when I was an OB-GYN going through medical training, we literally had like a couple paragraphs in a textbook in medical school, even for the clinical rotations being an OB-GYN. People just didn't even know. And it turns out the research from 10 years ago that scared everybody to death about hormone replacement therapy was largely overblown and not correct, and has been mostly pulled back. And so women haven't been given the information. And as you know, women of color and from different ethnic backgrounds have even more discrimination toward them in terms of how these things impact you based on your DNA, based on your heritage, based on your skin color, based on access to care. And so
Based on how you're treated when you go to care, your
Correct.
symptoms are even as women of color, Black women, your
Yes.
symptoms are even less if you think that white women are not heard.
Yes.
The symptoms are just not even acknowledged.
Yes.
Or-
And so one of the things that I am hopeful about is that, when I launched the podcast that I have, I just had this vision, walk with a friend. When you take a walk with a friend, you and I know we're going to be walking and talking a lot.
A lot.
We will be sharing all kinds of stuff that you're not going to be happy about. My husband's not going to be happy about. She's not gonna be happy about. We're going to be talking about our daughters and swapping stories and advice. And we're both going to leave feeling better. We're both going to feel like we have something we want to try or do. We both feel like somebody heard us and validated how we feel. And that's all I wanted the podcast to be. And I also was excited to put it in Boston, because it literally is the world's home of higher education. And how cool would it be to have all of these people that are teaching the classes and in the labs hop on the bikes and come on over, and that's what's been happening. And so to have doctors that the majority of us wouldn't even be able to get an appointment with, to come and share information that every human being deserves and has a right to have access to. We're talking about information that helps you live a healthy and happy life, which is exactly what you're doing here. You are democratizing information that every human being deserves to live a fulfilled, healthy, dignified life. And you're opening up the potential of the legacy that somebody leaves through how they live it. And if you can help people do better for themselves, for the people that they care about, for their communities, you are creating this ripple effect. And so for women, we are waking up and realizing, wait a minute. Like, I don't have to, you're going to have to say let them because you get angry, right? But the power is not in somebody else being wrong. The power is in going, okay, well, let me focus on what I'm going to think, do, and say. And if this idiot is not treating me the way I need to, I can leave any appointment, I can leave any medical office, I can leave any dining room table, any text chain, any interview, any date at any time. And I do not have to sit here and listen to somebody in a white coat tell me something that, is not the way I want to hear it. I have the power to leave this conversation and go talk to somebody else. I have the power to listen to this podcast and to learn what I need to learn from somebody that has studied this stuff. And so I'm really excited because the work that you're doing and some of the topics that we're covering are truly giving people the information that they need in order to change their lives for the better. Because again, going back to why am I so driven to be a person that is warm and that is sharing information and using my life and my struggles and the things that I wish were better or that I'm screwing up as the canvas upon which I'm trying to help and I'm trying to heal and do better myself, is because if you don't know, you can't make it better. if you don't know what the actual problem is, how on earth are you going to solve it? And so whether it is for me being dyslexic and ADHD and not getting diagnosed until I was 47, and I was diagnosed the same way the majority of women are diagnosed, because my son was going through the evaluations at school, and I started going, oh, that looks awful like me. And sure enough, it turns out I didn't actually ever have anxiety. I had dyslexia and ADHD, and nobody knew it, because in the 1970s, when they were studying ADHD, they only studied boys. And boys present jumpy. And they have symptoms that are the exact opposite of girls. Girls get quiet. They start to get very, very inward.
And hyper-focused.
Yes.
Yes.
So you miss it.
Yeah.
Because they can lock in, and you're like, well, that kid doesn't have ADHD. And so there is a huge generation of women, almost 30 years of us, who were diagnosed with anxiety in our teens and our 20s. And the real issue was dyslexia. The real issue is anxiety. And this is so sad. And we can actually change this. And I also think a lot about the fact I was a public defender when I came out of law school. I worked for legal aid in New York City. And the majority of people in prison have a learning disability.
Yes.
And if you do not have an adult figure out what you are struggling with, what adults do is they label you a problem. And when somebody is exhibiting challenging behavior, which you do if you're sitting in a classroom and your brain doesn't learn the way that people's brains learn, or you can't communicate what you need, adults punish people who are challenging. And the fact is, people do well when they can, kids in particular. And it's not an issue of motivation or capability or willpower. It's an issue of skills that are missing and simple problems that need to be solved. And so if you can change one person's life because they listen to this and they share it with somebody, then that's an incredible thing to do with your life. And if my story and my struggles, and look, I am happy to have struggled, even though I caused myself pain. I do not regret that. I do wish I hadn't caused other people pain. But if I can struggle for as long as I did with anxiety and with patterns of behavior that were very painful to me and painful to other people because I didn't know the core problems, but then I learn about it and now I can share it with millions of people, I will take that every day. I'll take the hit.
What does "it shall be" mean to you?
It shall be. My husband and I got tattoos on our 15th wedding anniversary. And I was like, we're going to get matching tattoos. No, we're not. And so Chris, of course, going in, he had figured his out. And I was panic-stricken because I could not figure out what to do.
And his was really good.
What's his?
Oh, yes, he won. And I was so annoyed once he told me because it was so good.
He has the tattoo right here, and it says "One Gate."
Mm-hmm.
And he used to be a ski racer growing up, and his dad always used to tell him, who passed away in 2007, always used to tell him, just take one gate, like a ski gate, at a time. Just take one gate at a time. Just take one gate at a time. And he translated that to like one day, one moment, 1 second. And he is like the most calm Buddhist Zen person I've ever met.
Very
and really,
present.
Yes, so
Wow.
present.
Wow.
He's a death doula. He's so incredible. But he took letters from his dad and got an O and got an N and got
that's
an E
beautiful.
Wow.
and got a G and got it morphed together and put on his thing.
Wow.
His dad's
on his
handwriting.
arm.
And
his
of
dad's
course, being the bitch that I am, when he came and told me that profound story and you've got your hand over your heart, I was like, oh! Now what am I going to do?
No, let them.
Yeah, look, I didn't have that back then. If I had had it back then, I would have been able to regulate myself like a mature
And then
adult.
let me.
Yes, exactly. And so I was just panic stricken because we were about to go to the appointment and a friend was over and I'm like, I still don't know what to get. And she goes, you should get "it shall be." I'm like, why? And she said, well, you say that all the time. I said, what do you mean? She said, oh, you always tell me if you just put your head down and you chip away at it and you give up your timeline, it shall be. I didn't even know I said it. And so then we get to the tattoo parlor. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. And I realized I didn't have a font. So then I'm on their laptop looking at the drop-down menu on Word, like, what should I do? And so anyway, that was the story.
Well, may I actually borrow your wrist just for a moment?
Yeah.
Because it's words and the
Oh,
stars.
Oh, that's
This is
another one.
recent.
I have one too.
Oh, these are.
Oh, is
you
it
have
matching?
Yeah, our family.
Mel, can you
all
put it up
got-
so we can capture
Yes.
that, if that's
so
okay?
Our family all got matching. It's on mine's on my wrist.
And mine's on the side of my
And
right
they're
wrist.
beautiful. So you have 3.
They're almost like the Bethlehem star.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you, your dad, all of your
actually,
siblings, your mom, like
the whole-
everybody?
The whole experience was inspired by my grandmother, my dad's mom,
Okay.
who she is. Shout out to JJ. She is actually the grandmother I went to Cambodia with
Yes,
and taught English with. And she is 87 years old. She's literally walks 4 miles every single day. She's 4'11". She has the energy of a firecracker. She is the most amazing human being in the world. And she had a friend of hers who
Was
dying, and she asked her friend, what do you think happens when you die? And with all conviction, her friend had said, I'm going to be a star. And I'm going to be a star. All of us are going to be stars. If you look up at the sky at night, there's billions and billions and billions of stars. And the reason behind that is because when you go up and you become a star, you can then look over all of your family members. And shooting stars are stars that travel to other people to see different people. And so then JJ was like, I'm going to get a star tattooed on me. And she's 87.
Wow.
And so
First tattoo.
Wow.
And so then, of course, when she told me, I was like, well, I need to get a star because I'm going to be a star and you're going to be a star.
Aw.
And then, so all 5 of us, our entire family, me, mom, dad, Oakley, Kendall, and JJ, we all got our tattoo appointment and went, and we all have different stars.
Yep, and then I put our whole family, like, so I have a Sawyer star and an Oakley and Chris and me, and so they're all here with me.
And I have 1 star and 5 dots for every single
For
one
every
of
That's
them.
amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. It's one of my best friends who she actually is a death doula.
Really?
And she was with my mom when my mom passed, and it was the most incredible gift that anyone could give us. And she also has something she created called Star Day. And it's when you celebrate your ancestors on the day that they went to go back to live in the stars. So I need to get you. And so
No
she wrote
way.
a children's book.
Oh, I would love that.
And so I'm telling you,
We are.
we're the same tribe. And
well,
I'll
you
get you
know-
the whole book, and it's all about that. And then you celebrate that day that they went back to be in the stars, and so you eat their favorite food, and you
So
talk
beautiful.
about.
Oh my
all of
gosh, I
that.
love that.
Yeah,
love
you
that.
Will, yeah.
Wow.
Great concept.
Mel, something that we are contemplating a lot and would love to get your theory on is the difference between the Western concept of happiness versus fulfillment. And fulfillment as a source from within, a source from love. And the Western concept of happiness is this treadmill that we can never often ever achieve because we're always seeking the next thing.
Well, the cool thing about the distinction that I'm going to share with you is that it comes from someone's research. And the person I'm going to cite is Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, one of the kind of original rock star happiness professors at one of the Ivy League schools. And he has this concept that I love because happiness, what we get wrong about it is we believe that there is a thing out there that will make you happy all the time. And the problem with that is once you get the thing, your happiness or your excitement or enthusiasm, whatever you call it, just disappears right away because you got the thing. And we have this relentless need to feel good. So we're constantly looking out there and we think, well, maybe the car, or maybe, it's the boyfriend or the girlfriend, or maybe it's a certain dollar in the bank, or maybe it's a certain number on the scale, or it's a certain friend group or whatever. That is going to create this feeling inside me that I so not only want, but you actually deserve to feel good in your life. But we're going about it wrong. And so he basically says, anytime you want something out there, it's like staring at the sun. If you look directly at the sun, just like you look directly at your bank account and say, I'm going to be happy if I have $1 million in that bank account, you're going to get sunspots and you're going to be blinded. And you're going to be miserable as you're trying to get it, because you're going to think you're only going to feel good once you get there. Instead, he says, I want you to take the sun and put it through a prism, and it creates a rainbow. And when you realize that that's what's available to you right now, that's what you can bring into your life right now. That it's not really out there, it's all the things that you can take in and bring in here that truly create fulfillment.
So Sawyer,
Martin.
what's one thing you'd want your mom to know about the impact she's had on your life?
So much, but the first thing that came to mind is, I think growing up, I thought that my legacy was being Mel Robbins' daughter. And I think in writing this book together and just getting to spend so much time with you, that it's actually a lot bigger than that. And it's the let them theory, and it's so many more things that I have not achieved. And so thank you for opening that vision for me. I love you.
I love you. And you know what I'm going to tell you?
Oh, God.
I had the easy part. I just had to learn to create the space for you to see it yourself.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Proud of you.
I gotta say, I got 3 kids, and so just listening to you, and I'm away a lot for work, to see the two of you, as you said, go through your journey, but be at this incredibly strong place together, to see you work together, create together, to hear the love in your voice. Oh my God, I love the honesty and everything about the conversation. Love them for who they are, and love them for who they are not. My God, I think we can all reflect on that with our family and friends. Can't control others. We just need to let them and to let me. I love that. And you can only meet someone as deeply as you've met yourself. And it has been such a gift for all of us to spend so much time with both of you and to have this extraordinary experience as mother and daughter and friend and co-journeyer on this together. So thank you to both of you for leaving an extraordinary legacy every single day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this experience.
you.
Like, what
Thank
a
you.
beautiful experience that you've created for us to be able to dig deeper into our own experience and what we've learned. Sometimes the hard way.
Always.
Always. Amazing.
Thank you guys for having me.
Wow.
Thank you for joining us. We are so grateful to have you as part of this journey. If you enjoyed today's conversation, subscribe and share the podcast with friends, family, and loved ones, and follow us on social media at My Legacy Movement. Until next time, may you find connection and inspiration to live your most fulfilled life.